Hello YouTube and welcome back to my channel. First thing I'd like to say is, as much as we all appreciate the NHS are doing an absolutely outstanding job, they do all the time anyway, and especially in these times at the moment where it's really difficult for them and almost horrific, I would say. There are other people out there that are also working, so as much as I'm obviously, as I said, we all appreciate the NHS. I'd just like to say a big thank you to every single body out there that is actually providing a service through these troubled times that we're in at the moment. So the NHS, I'm definitely not dissing them because, like I said, they're fantastic. But there are other lots of unsung heroes out there as well that I feel maybe have been a bit left out. So from me, thank you to absolutely everybody, including the NHS, for what a sterling job you're doing out there and keeping the UK moving. It's really difficult in these times. Thank you. So, with that said, it's time to focus on the train set. So I'll bring my own little bit of help to everyone that's sitting at home at the moment, bored and wondering what to do. So I've ordered some more stuff now from Megapoint. So I've got the rest of the bits coming, the rest of the servo mounts, and all the rest of the control gear in order to get the rest of my point work up and running, so as it all works, so as everything's electrified. There's one more turnout I need to lay in order to complete that, which is this one here, which is the one that goes off into my RFD depot. So I've sort of been mucking around with a little bit of sort of like how I want to lay the track, because it's kind of in a yard, so you can probably get away with slightly tighter curves than what you might do ordinarily. But equally, there's no point in having tight curves if you're going to have issues. Now, I've not used anything like template on this layout. This is all freehand, but then I am a master modeler and I don't need template. Ha ha ha. No, I jest. Template is a superb thing, but I just found that for myself, I've sort of like just freehanded it, and it's done me proud. But there are areas. This curve here is, I think, a little bit too tight. So I do need to sort of look at that. And there's this curve here may not look that tight, but that is about as tight as what you ever want to go, especially with P4. So there are a couple of areas where, had I used template, I could have maybe jiggled it around so it was a little bit better. But as I said, I didn't. But we live and learn. It's everything else seems to work. I've run stuff over it quite regularly, and yeah, I'm pleased with it. So for this piece of track here, I absolutely have a foolproof, superb way of testing to make sure that they work and don't give me any problems. So these are two VGA vans, and VGAs are going to be one of the vehicles that are going to traverse this quite often or quite frequently. So, and they're also coupled together with the screw link couplings. So for doing that, you have to allow enough space for the screw links to move, etc, and they can throw up their own little pieces that may be sort of something like the tension locks, or the new Hunt couplings probably wouldn't give you the same sort of problems. But when you're going for the more prototypical coupling, you do have to think about tighter areas, this is one of the problems with this, that these things here, they tend to buff a lot through there. As where if I was using tension lock, as I said, or Hunt couplings in, they couldn't get that close to buffer lock. So that really wouldn't be a problem. But also it needs to look prototypical. So I think I've got my curves sort of sorted out. So what I've been doing is I've been running these two wagons down and sort of like just testing them, just to make sure that I'm not going to get any buffer lock, and I've got space there. Highly scientific, as you can see. The derailments are probably because the track's just sort of placed, and it's not. I don't think it's falling off because of it's not derailing for tightness issues. So I'm quite pleased with that. That's the buffers, plenty of space for the buffers to move and not give any problems. So that's that row checked. And the same with that one. So I'm quite pleased with that. what I might do is just go and get a couple of other small vans. Okay, these vans shouldn't have any problems because they are designed to go around sort of tighter radiuses, but famous last words, I suppose. No, I didn't have a problem. Nor did they. So, all good. With that tested, and I'm quite happy with them curves. So that is going to be the rough placing of that track. That's going to be the rough placing of the turnout. So the next thing to do is get a piece of track from here to there, get the cork in so as I can mount this. strangely enough, the very first piece of cork that went down was this piece here, and that was in 2017. So it's almost ironic that the last piece of cork is dead opposite, and that's 2020. But I suppose at least it's progress. So all I need to do now is link up where my two tracks are going to go. But this area here is obviously going to be, or is going to need to be where the lorries turn. So I'm not totally sure, because that'll be a step up, and then going over the rails needs to be another step up. So I'm not totally sure how I want to finish this area here, because you sort of think when the lorries drive down off that bridge here and then come down into here, or through the arch that's going to be there, it's kind of, I wouldn't want to be an Arctic driver in this area because there wouldn't be a lot of space. So it's one of them things where you're going to sort of need to use a bit of modeller's license. But they will need to sort of use this as well as a swing. Plus the fact you're going to have forklifts that will be running, sort of offloading the vehicles sort of like up here and possibly down here. And the lorries also sort of offloading the materials going sort of both ways here. So these tracks effectively can't be raised because they'd be damaged. So everything needs to be flat. So like I said, I'm not totally sure how I'm going to do that yet, but what I'll do is I'll get the pieces of cork in and then I'll worry about that afterwards. Okay, so sort of weighted down, so I'll let that dry, so that'll be tomorrow now, and then I can come down here, get the point in place exactly, and we'll go through, do some wiring and bits and pieces. Hopefully, well, maybe the mega points stuff might have arrived by then, but I think it'll probably be more like Saturday. Okay, so from the point of wiring up, it might be easier if I explain it by just doing it like this. So we'll just say, for the sake of argument, this rail here is positive, this rail here is negative, this rail here is positive, this rail here is negative. So the V rail could be either, and the reason for that is if the train is running straight, so this rail won't change because that's always going to be positive, and the train then comes up here. This is a negative rail because obviously it's come from our negative side, so that goes up there, so that makes that negative. And if the train comes round here, we'll call that positive. So when the train comes from this direction, that's the positive rail. Only problem is, when the point's changed, it's a negative rail. So that's how, this is why the V needs to change polarity, because it could be either depending on which way the train's going off. And obviously, if you come up here and this was still the positive rail, then that would just short out. So what we use, or what I use, is a relay. So I'll go through that. When I come to wire up the points, I'll show you the relay and how I do it. But so the reason why I do that is this V rail becomes grey and then all the others just become the standard colour. But it's just purely because, as I say, when the train's coming from this direction, this needs to be the negative rail. But when the train's coming from this direction, as you can see, it needs to be the positive rail. And like that's so hence why that needs to change polarity. Hope that sort of explains it. It's difficult one to try and explain. Everyone's got their own ideas as to how it can be, etc, etc. But I think that probably shows it the easiest way, is that depending on which way that throw's set as to whether or not this is positive or negative. And because that's one lump, you can't, it won't allow it, so it has to change polarity. So I have my colour, so I'll start off with my grey. So what I like to do is tin them first. I think that's pretty much the standard. Tend not to use flux where you don't have to. And this should tin up okay without any flux. And tinning, if you don't know what that is, basically that just means that you put like a solder, just like a solder straight on the wire, so it gives it something to bite into. That's what tinning is. Then this is going to go onto the V-rail. So I tend to put it across all four there like that. On my track, this is positive, that's the negative. That's just the way that it's ended up on mine, but it may not necessarily be the same for you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to clean up a little bit here, a little bit there, solder my negative, positive on, and then that'll be this point ready for use. I also go across the check rails as well, but there's no real need to. But if it moves, it just gives it that little bit of extra. So that's them two cleaned up, ready for use. One of my other great ideas, because I'm using servo point motors or servos to throw my points, they throw an arc, so effectively the pin comes up and then drops back down. And what I'm having issues, I'm trying to cut the pins as low as possible. I'm having issues where the pins are actually coming out the points. Now that's not on all of them, and it's not a big problem, but it might be once it's all finished. It might be a big problem. So it's something I want to sort of try and address now. So I've had this great idea where I'm going to put a bit of extra tube in and sort of extend, so you can see, I don't know if you can sort of see the hole where the piece of metal would have gone up to actually activate the point. Now I know that there's hundreds of different ways of throwing points, and this is just one of them. There are also different bits and pieces on the market, so as they're not actually making like the arc movement, they're sort of throwing straight backwards and forwards, which is maybe a different way of doing it. But I'm just a cheapskate, so I'm trying to sort of do it and use stuff that I've already got. Plus fact, it's one of the things where you've got a problem, or a potential problem, so you need to sort of possibly address it rather than just going out for something that's proprietary. So what I'm thinking is to actually solder this piece of tube, which is fairly tiny, into there. You probably can't really see that, but that will go in there, and then that will allow a little bit more drop. So I'll sink that into the baseboard. The actual tube of the servo wire will go in there, and then hopefully that can throw and won't be a problem. But probably with me it will be a problem. But we'll do it as an experiment and we'll find out. So I'm going to solder this in and see what happens. So I actually need to cut this piece of tube. And strangely enough, the easiest way to do that, as weird as it might sound, is actually with just a craft knife and then just sort of rock it backwards and forwards. It might sound really weird, but it does actually work. I'm going to sort of make it about 10-12 mil long. Oh dear, that's sort of gone flying. Can't even be bothered to look for that in my pile of junk, so I'll have another go. There you go. And let's cut that really quickly. So that is actually a really good, efficient way of cutting it. Probably doesn't work quite as well for the larger sizes, but for the smaller sizes, that is a good way of cutting tube. So the next thing to do is give it a bit of a clean up, so as we've got a key to solder to, because again, dirty metal don't solder. So that's nice and clean now, and hopefully I can solder this into there like that, sort of flat, and then that'll give somewhere for the tube to go up, or for the wire from the servo to go up. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to squeeze that in just a tad. Just so as it holds it enough. And then I've got that coming down off the bottom, and effectively that's what the piece of wire from the servo will go into, but it won't actually stick out past the top, and then that should allow that to throw. That's the plan. Whether or not it actually works is another thing. So what I need to do now is solder that in there. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, well, that's pretty solid. So we'll see whether or not that's actually helped or worked or anything else tomorrow. So once I get the servo wired up, we'll see whether or not that's actually done what I think it's going to. So we'll see how we go with that. It's an experiment. I've had a delivery today from Mega Points. That's my frog relay board. And I've also had some more of the servo motor holders and some more relays. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one of these together for that turn out now. So the last lot of these I had were already built, but I don't see that being much of a problem. So I think first thing to do is get them out. I think that's one. These bits have to push out as well. Sometimes it's worth keeping little bits like that for odds and sods. You can paint them up for different things. Right, so there's all the bits. So we start with, that's the piece that the servo screws into. So I'll do that first. Then that's the top. That's the side, and that's the other side. So they go together quite quick and quite easy. So that's not too bad. These are the servos that I'm using, or these are the ones that I've got anyway, so I don't know, there are probably cheaper and more expensive ones out there, but these ones are about £3-4 each, which I think is probably about the average. So that Just goes in there like that, and then that just screws in like so. Probably worth gluing that together before you screw it all together, mounting it to the bottom of the layout, and then go, oh dear, it's fallen apart. Another thing that I've been doing is just to use a bit of double-sided sticky tape just to lock these into position, and then hopefully you can get a screw in them afterwards. It's alright if you're working sort of upside down or forward, it's probably not a problem, but for me, I've sort of left myself with a few issues with access, so I found it a lot easier just to do this. And then put the screws in afterwards. Right, so one other thing I need to do before I can put a train over it is just check to make sure that I've got the correct polarity. So when the turnout's diverging to this road, I should have power across these two tracks, which I have, and there shouldn't be anything across here, which there isn't. And then when I change the turnout to go straight, that should change. So now to turn out straight, I need the power across them two, which it is, and nothing across them two, which there isn't. So hopefully now I should be able to run a train without any shorts. So I've got the 08, I'm going to try that. Can only go as far as here obviously, but as long as I can get as far as there, then that'll prove that. Okay, well that's proved that, so I can carry on. Next stage is to get the tracks in down to the depot, so that's the next bit I'm going to do. I'll probably do that off camera and I'll come back to you once once they're installed, and we'll give it another test run. Maybe even take the maybe even catch a cab ride down there. Cheers.